What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Ravens Watch. Give me one second. Let me fix this thing real quick. There we go. All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Ravens Watch. I am your host, David Lee Corbo, aka The Raven, and we are doing something a little bit different today. Um, we recently aired an episode on Nephilim Death Squad where we had a guest. His name was Colin. It was actually a very big episode. And Colin is sort of the name we're using for him. He anonymously shared a story about his own experience with the supernatural. And it was a wild story. It involved abduction experiences. It also involved things that he thought might have been angels. There was this sense that he was upgraded for war through some procedure. He even had an experience where he believed that he communed with God. Although he wasn't able to see him, he felt as though he was in his presence and that he had a conversation, a very meaningful one, that unfortunately he was made not to remember. And so, in that way, it was almost like a dream. It's a very compelling story. We spoke, Top and I, on Nephilim Death Squad with Colin at length. I would say the episode was probably about 2 hours long. And from that episode, we were able to connect dots in Colin's experience to other stories that we had heard on shows like The Confessionals with Tony Merkel. For example, on his show, he had a guest who had an experience very similar to Colin's. In the dream realm, he was recruited for war, a coming war. And this is something that Colin also experienced. And in Tony Merkel's show, this person was recruited to the dark side of things. After we aired this show, I had more than a few people reach out to me and say that they had a very similar experience. This idea that there is this coming war, this coming conflict, and that people are being recruited. And so, one of the stories I found really compelling doesn't necessarily have elements of a coming war as much as it has elements of interactions with entities and this implied notion that there is factions in the spiritual realm, um, jockeying for position and trying to control things. A very chaotic situation. So, um, right out of the gate, I'm sure that that's all very jarring. But before we get into that, I would like to go over a few bits of business. And so let's see if I can do this correctly. We're going to share screen. Boom. And all right. So if you go to toplobster.com and you click on the top bar here that says Nephilim Death Squad, it'll bring you to this drop down. You click on this bad boy right here, and boom, Nephilim Death Squad merch. And so, what I want to talk about real quick is our partnership with Rife Technology. That's realrifetechnology.com. Matt Rife of Rife Technology, who manufactures and sells these therapeutic frequency devices, has agreed to team up with us for the month of January. Anybody who buys Nephilim Death Squad merch in from now until the end of January will be put into a raffle. And at no cost to you, at the end of January, a wheel will be spun, which is actually pretty cool because Matt Rife is actually manufacturing. He's 3D printing a wheel for us to spin, which is going to be a lot of fun. So we're going to do it in person. And so your name will be entered into this raffle, and whoever the wheel lands on is going to receive a, I believe it's called an enhanced Royal Rife machine, which is sold for $5,500. If I'm not mistaken, it's the highest product that he offers, and one of our viewers, one of the purchasers of Nephilim Death Squad merch will be getting this for free. And so I just wanted to show off this real quick. This is actually my favorite shirt. This comes from an episode that we did on Nephilim Death Squad with Paul of Understanding Conspiracy. And we were talking about the Ronald McDonald House Foundation for Kids and how Ronald McDonald, having the visage of a clown and the Nephilim having a visage of a clown was actually probably a Nephilim himself. And so we joked around about this idea of the logo instead having 6 fingers. And so you can see here Ronald McDonald's 6-fingered Nephilim hand grasping that of a young child that I'm sure he's going to whisk off, drain of adrenalized blood and torture this child. And it says interdimensional Nephilim shit. One of my favorite shirts. We have a bunch of stuff like this. And so if you make any purchase during the month of January, from now until January, the end of it, you'll be entered into the raffle and you could be the winner of a Royal Rife machine. And let's see real quick. I hope this is all working. I haven't even, yeah, okay, we're doing that. So, yeah, looking forward to that. That's going to be a lot of fun. And give me 1 second, guys. That should have stopped sharing. I just want to show you quickly what it is that you're going to be entering to win. Boom. Boom. Let's go to shop now. You always got to go to realrifetechnology.com. And here is our enhanced Royal Rife machine. $5,500. Could be yours for free. And this is a therapeutic frequency device created by Matt Rife himself, not the comedian, but a much cooler Matt Rife, in my opinion. And so this could be yours if you purchase Nephilim Death Squad merch from now until the end of January. All right, so getting into it. I don't want to do a big ad read for the entire show. Let's bop. All right, so I want to get into one of the submissions that I got. Like I said, after Colin's episode, I was reached out to by a lot of people who had these very similar experiences of being recruited for some sort of war, being in contact with entities that are, in my opinion, like really hard to pin down, to know the nature of them. I am not an advocate of communing with spiritual entities because just like people, I believe these things can lie. And so, if a person can weave a very convincing lie, I wonder what some ancient fucking spirit can do. So I'm not an advocate of doing that, but it seems that it's going to happen. Some people are just destined to come into contact with these things. It seems that the ones that communicated with Colin were benign, although still, you can be deceived. But for all intents and purposes, Colin's life has been improved dramatically at adhering to the behest of these things that communicate with him. So, in other words, they'll tell him to pursue something that's going to improve an aspect of his life. And so, since Colin has been in contact with these things, he initially started contacting them via mushroom usage. Now he does not do any drugs or anything like that. He's running miles. He's working out. He's going to church. These things told him to pursue a relationship with God, which I find terribly interesting because I struggle then to understand the nature of these things. And maybe I do have a lens to look at the nature of these things and make sense of it. And we'll get to that part later on. And so his experience seemed positive overall. This other experience that I'm going to read for you guys today is actually very different in nature. I'm just going to use my phone, although I don't like doing that because it looks like I don't know why. Something about looking down at my phone seems very unprofessional, but I'm going to do it anyway. All right, so let's go here. Actually, you know what? I do believe I brought it up. Yeah, it's already on my tabs. Let me just make sure I'm not sharing that because I want to maintain the privacy of this individual. And I think we'll just call him M. Let's do that. All right, so M, he watches the episode that we have with Colin. He had actually sent me a really compelling story before that, but I hadn't gotten around to looking at it because I'm inundated with messages regularly these days. So let's see. I believe it starts right here. So M says, I'm watching this new episode and I've had an experience like this. And I know another person in real life that's had a similar experience. So M has watched the Colin episode. He says, I'm not super far into this episode and I've only talked about it a couple of times because I don't want people to think I'm nuts. And that's something that I see a lot from these people. A lot of the times I'd like for them to come on the show. And unfortunately, there's a really big stigma around this, right? What are you going to tell people that you're in contact with interdimensional beings? Not everybody is so willing to destroy their public visage as maybe I am. And so he doesn't want people to think he's nuts. He says it's bad enough that he plays up the flat earth thing and question 9/11. He doesn't need any more scrutiny. And does say that his mother has been diagnosed a paranoid schizophrenic. And if you guys remember, all of these things connect, right? We just did an episode on Nephilim Death Squad with Dr. Jerry Marzinski, a clinical psychologist of 35 years, who, after all of his research in the field and working directly with schizophrenic patients, he's come to the conclusion that these people are being influenced by something outside of themselves, and that these aren't just hallucinations, because hallucinations do not adhere to a set of reliable patterns. Patterns with which Dr. Marzinski has laid out. I believe he said he's got 23 of them. We'll be having him back on at some point to discuss the interviews, which have all been transcribed between himself and these schizophrenic patients and their multiple personalities that he's in contact with, or the voices that he's in contact with. So a lot of hesitation. His mom is a schizophrenic. Interesting note. Extra weird thing, he says, me and the dude that he knows in real life, he said another individual had the same experience, were also going through divorce or a really long and bad relationship breakup. So that's really interesting because in my experience, these things feed off of negativity, and a divorce is devastating, right? A big relationship. When I had separated with my ex, years ago, probably over 10 years ago now. And I remembered recently that when I did separate with her, my life got better and I found somebody who I ended up marrying. It's my current wife. So fantastic life pivot by all accounts. However, there was this glimmer of a moment before my wife came into my life where I was going down this path of Crowleyism. I was starting to research a lot more. I had always been aware of Aleister Crowley, Hermetic principles, occultism, sort of the dark arts, but I had always stayed away from it. And now looking back at this moment after this big breakup, it was a 7-year relationship, so it was devastating to me. I was cheated on, I was dumped, and hindsight, I'm grateful for it having happened, but needless to say, I didn't take it very well at the time. So I started to go down this path where I would have otherwise been hesitant in the past, because I've always found myself to be a very moral person and very aware of like the dark side, and I never wanted to play that game. But I do remember I was entertaining the idea for a while there. And so this could just be one of those instances of these entities feed off of negative emotion, depression, fear, anxiety, anger. These are all the, sort of what would you call it? Entrees for them. And so maybe there's a correlation to be noted there. Long story short, I've already made this incredibly long, much longer than this gentleman. Long story short, I was basically begging for one last shot to try to get things straight with my wife at the time. I hit rock bottom, breaking point, and was asking for help from anyone or anything. Wasn't Christian at the time. I was first approached by something just not good. When it spoke to me, it rattled my bones. I could feel it like forcefully increasing my level of fear, I guess is the best way to put it. And I got to say there, boom, forcefully increasing your level of fear. These things have this ability, and there is like a resonance. He describes a resonance in his bones, right? This is very interesting to me because in my own experiences, I've had these moments of I always am curious as to how people describe it. Some people describe it as being electrocuted. Some people describe it as a vibration. He's describing it as a resonance in his bone. I think they're all of the same methodology, just different levels of intensity. And so what I experienced was what I felt like was an electrical sensation running through my body, locked me up. And directly associated with that feeling in the very moment is this otherworldly level of fear and dread associated with this, right? This is what I've experienced. This is what countless other people experience. It's the buzzing or the electrocution and the doom, the dread, the fear, immeasurable levels of fear. Okay, so boom, where were we at? And then he goes on, he says, man, I feel nuts just talking about this shit, dude. Which, like, I'm happy that people even share these things with me, and I do feel terrible that people feel embarrassed too. But you don't got to feel embarrassed with me because I'm believing you, man. Um, he says he's barely touched on it with his current wife. He's mentioned it in passing, but kind of dodged any other, bringing up of it until she dropped it. Anyway, he rejected its offer and just kept pleading. Very interesting. I was then approached by something else that was lighter. Like it literally felt like the opposite of the oppressive one. Lighter, he reiterates. It didn't speak to me. There wasn't a voice at first. It just showed me what it meant with images, which I have heard before. Um, almost like flashcards in the mind. When it was there with me, everything had a kind of golden hue shimmer thing around it. Now I'm wondering if I had taken some mushrooms, if I would have had even more profound experience. And the reason he says that is because, like I said in the beginning of Colin's experiences, he was communing with these entities through mushroom use, which, once again, certainly would not recommend, although the nature of the entities that Colin came into contact with, they certainly aren't leading with darkness. And if they are dark and misleading him, they're doing so through this uh, a very much more positive angle. Okay, so he said, "Look, hit me up if you want to know more. I know you're busy. I'm not going to blow you up." Boom, boom, boom. He said, "This show is blowing my mind," and he's talking about multiple guides right now. Colin, he's talking about was speaking about multiple guides in the show. Colin, he communed with several entities, and M here says he can confirm. Heard the same in my experience over time. He said shit's blowing his mind. I don't know what this guy's going to say as far as upgrades. Okay, so, and he does say in regards to the upgrades that he believes it's much more of like a software update. Oh, no, he said it wasn't. I'm sorry. It wasn't like a software update. It was unlocking something that's already there. He watches a bit more of the episode, and about 10 minutes later, he comes back and he says, yeah, I wouldn't call it upgraded, unlocked. He says, we all have these innate abilities. They just have to be unlocked. And now we're going into like something that's very, once again, I would caution anybody against this because this starts to teeter on the edge of new age. And I'm certainly not dismissing M's experience as like being outright negatively new aged. But these are things that in my mind resonate with those ideologies. And so this idea of unlocking untapped potential, evolving spiritually. Okay, so some people do it themselves. My experience unlocked some stuff for me. I'll be upfront. Over time, it called itself a jinn. And for those of you who aren't familiar, a jinn is something that's very common in Middle Eastern, I don't want to call it mythology, just culture. And it's like the idea of where we get genies from. I believe it's even like phonetically attached to the word jinn, genie, and that These things are spirits, desert spirits. Um, on Nephilim Death Squad, we call that Nephilim shit. In my opinion, I think it's all connected to those early beings, the fallen themselves and the offspring of the fallen, and these various hybrids and spirits that were created as a result of their sort of fuckery. Called itself a jinn. I asked if it was an angel, and it said the closest thing that I know it to be would be a jinn. So when he asked it if it was an angel, this thing was like more closely a jinn. So, and then he says, I want to let you know ahead of time, I'm not talking about this publicly. This dude today has a lot more balls than I do, even with the ability to stay anonymous. And that he was told, M was told by these entities, you're not supposed to draw attention to this stuff. So this shit is for you and Top to talk about. I don't care if he reads it, but I'm not going to go public with my story. And he's like, I don't know. I sound schizo as fuck right now, and I hate it. So I'm going to shut the fuck up right now. Great sense of humor, and once again, it's just that thing of like, I feel bad because, in my opinion, we are engaged in spiritual warfare, and the culture is such that you cannot communicate this without feeling, I don't think just embarrassed. It's a mixture of things, right? It's embarrassing because it's not culturally accepted, but also these entities that I believe are very real are kind of compelling you to shut your mouth. And that is, there are a lot of things that are scary in life. Being threatened on a spiritual level, that's about as scary. Shit that happens to your immortal soul is much more concerning to me than things that happen to your physical form. So once again, he expresses that he feels schizophrenic. So, all right. So, and he goes on to elaborate that his experience was a quid pro quo situation, and we'll get into that a little bit. And so here, he reaches the end of the episode with Colin, and his kind of parting thoughts on it were, Top just said it. Some of them are trying to get back in God's good graces. 100% fact. Many of them regret rebelling against God, and the one that he dealt with was one of those, apparently. And so, to elaborate on that moment right there, Top begins to speculate that, and I'm this is going to be real paraphrasing, because whenever I do an episode, it's like trauma, and I don't remember like what we said at all. So only him saying this is like jogging some sort of memory. But I know what we talked about was this idea that very much like, as above, so below. Right? Below, here on Earth, we struggle with multitudes of factions jockeying for power constantly, in the form of government and other entities, corporations, banks. Everybody wants to rule the world, right? So the same thing is happening in the spiritual realm. So the idea would be that when a third of the angels rebelled against God and they were cast out of heaven, Lucifer led the rebellion, and I'm sure that some of the angels stuck with him. And then I'm sure that in that very moment, there were some angels that realized, like, holy shit, this dude's a moron, totally fucked us up, led us astray. Let me back in. You know, the meme with the dude that's like pulling on the gates outside the White House, and he's like, let me in. Like, right from the jump, all those years ago, they knew it, but it was too late to turn around. So they've been working ever since then. And then there are other factions that maybe like do vibe with the idea of rebelling against God, don't want Lucifer as a leader, right? These are all egotistical maniacs, essentially. They break into factions that way. Well, I'm going to lead this group. Well, I'm going to lead that group. I don't want to be, I don't want to follow so-and-so, whatever the case is. And then over time, there are other factions that like a couple thousand years go by and they're like, we fucked up. Now we got to turn around and start trying to do the right thing. So I think that I really see that as like a pretty logical way of looking at this, is like, look, guys, I know what I'm talking about is completely schizophrenic shit. Suspend all your disbelief and entertain for a moment the idea that there is a spiritual realm and that there is spiritual warfare. I think that it's not much of a stretch to say it's not clean cut. It's not just the good guys versus the bad guys. It's like there's a lot of gray area. And I'm sure regret is something that other entities would experience, not just us. So, uh, that was the first part of what he said. Let me see here. Boom, boom, boom. Also, just so you guys know, I think that I'm going to be taking the Ravens Watch in this direction in the future. It's become very difficult to try to schedule guests for both the Ravens Watch and Nephilim Death Squad. And I always feel like whoever I interview on my own, it's going to be a much better episode if Top and I interview them together. Excuse me. And so I've been having a lot of trouble with that lately. And what I've decided to do was make this much more of a one-on-one with the fans. I can see maybe doing interviews in the future, but for now, we're going to stick with just me solo. So the Ravens Watch is just going to be me solo, tackling different topics every episode. The interviews, we're going to keep them to Nephilim Death Squad, but you guys can still come here, hang out in the chat, and communicate with me one-on-one. So let's get back to this story. What did I say? Why do you suspect they didn't want you to talk about it? Okay. Oh, this is great. Great, great, great. So I asked him, I said, what makes you suspect that these things didn't want you to talk about it? And he said, it gives a peek at their hand to the other players that are out there. There's also supposed to be this veil where everything Top and I are talking about is complete bullshit and easily dismissible by the general public. Now imagine if several thousand people came forward with similar experiences, varying in details but generally agreeing on several things. Especially with how fast information travels now, disclosure would have to be sooner rather than later. And so yeah, I agree with that sentiment, right? It's like there's supposed to be a veil separating all this shit. And it is not strategically advantageous to allow any of the other parties to know your hand. And the veil of secrecy itself is advantageous. It's like, how can you fight an enemy you don't even believe exists? So, okay. Now, and I know we're dealing in a really crazy kind of realm here, but logically, in my mind, this tracks. I don't know what that says about me, but whatever. Okay, so he also goes on to say, but there's not just two sides of this war, like we were saying before. There's several, and I think that's why all the political situations are so chaotic. It's not just two sides pulling the strings. They're in the physical and the metaphysical. It's several. Imagine if you were an angel. Boom. This is where I got this idea. I liken this to, so I guess Top alluded to it, and it was actually M that expanded on this idea. And I love this idea. This is what I just said, but we're gonna go ahead and read because he was the one that presented this to me, and I do think that it tracks. So imagine if you were an angel that got duped by Satan. After finding out exactly how incompetent and wrong he was after you joined him, you'd probably turn against him. But you're still pissed at the Almighty too. And you know some of your brethren feel the same way, so you've got a little metaphysical party of your own. And then there's ones that regretted leaving immediately, and they're doing their best to get back in his good graces and go home. Then there's the ones who regretted it over time. He says something interesting. The ones that started as humans and became a great value, bastardized version of these things. That's interesting. So I guess there's a place amongst the darkness potentially for some humans that like they dedicate their lives to it. Like Aleister Crowley probably has a place on Satan's lap. I think is what he's trying to say here. Let's see. You got several factions here manipulating our reality and moving us chess pieces against one another. So pitting us against one another. Maybe when the seventh trumpet sounds, they'll draw one like in the sand, and it'll get whittled down to two sides. But I think as of right now, oh, okay, I see what he's saying. So maybe when the trumpet sounds, these will sort of consolidate. and there will be two definitive sides. Um, but as of right now, there's a lot of metaphysical cloak and dagger going on. Now, if you're from one of these camps, doesn't matter which one, and you're creating a new human asset sleeper cell, you probably wouldn't want that being used, that being to use its free will and to say, hey, listen to this experience I had. Humans won't pay attention to that unless it becomes overwhelmingly loud. Uh, Not humans will notice every single time. That's interesting. And I do think we're kind of at this point now where it's like these experiences are getting overwhelmingly loud. A lot of you guys in the chat right now are watching, or if you're listening later on down the line, you might just be hearing about this for the first time. I'm certainly not. I've been onto shows for a while now. Blurry Creatures, Tony Merkel's The Confessionals, Tinfoil Hat podcast, my own personal experiences, anecdotal experiences I've collected from around the internet. Now, with my show, communicating with people who have had these experiences, this is something that seems to be coming to a boil, rising, and maybe getting to the point where it's going to start overflowing soon. And I don't know what that speaks to, but it is something that I've noticed as becoming much more commonplace. Okay, so let's go down. Granted, they have largely different views on things than we do. They're preparing for a destiny war. I assume that similar strategies would apply, like not outing yourself as someone who's had contact. Now, the guy did say that he was told it was time to talk about it, so maybe this is a big sign that we're actually in endgame territory. So what he means there is Colin on the previous show expressed that initially, I don't know if we said this on air, he couldn't do he was propositioned by Top before we had a show, before Nephilim Death Squad was a thing. He wanted him on his YouTube channel, Top Lobster, and he wanted him to tell this story, and it just wasn't time yet. And these entities that he was in communication with, I believe, made his life like pretty difficult, and it was so jarring to him that he pulled back. These things expressed exclusively, it was not, they didn't want him talking to anybody about this, which is a repeated theme, even in and I'm not saying that any of these characters are schizophrenic. Jerry Marzinski in the episode, Dr. Jerry Marzinski, the clinical psychologist of 35 years, says that these voices do not like when their victims communicate with another person about them, about the voices. So this theme is something that you catch a lot. And I don't think that these guys are schizophrenic. But then again, I also don't think that schizophrenia is a valid fucking diagnosis. I'm sorry, guys. I'm just at that point now where I got enough information. I mean, you sit down with a guy, a professional for 35 years in the field, and he's telling you that, how am I supposed to argue with him? And knowing how far the medical industry has failed us at every possible turn, I'm much more willing to listen to its defectors than I am the official narratives. And so I don't think that these guys are schizophrenic, whatever that even means anymore. And so there is this theme, though, right, where the voices don't want you communicating with other people. Colin's voices didn't want that at first. And this is very curious, piques my interest, honestly tickles my ego a little bit, because once we start doing the show, Nephilim Death Squad, all of a sudden these things, they allow him to come on the show. And they know leading up to the show, which I've also heard, these things know. Like I've heard people suffering from interactions with these entities on other shows, and that is a common theme. Hey, they were aware that I was coming on the show, and they were very opinionated about it, to put it, I guess, gingerly. And so for whatever reason, these things say that it's, and all Colin said, because of course I got to ask, hey, why is it okay to come and hang with the boys? How come you're allowed to come on the show now? And I believe he kept it really simple. He just said that they say that you and Top are good guys, and you're honest, and you're seeking. I don't know what that means. Very ambiguous. Makes me feel a little good inside that something in the spiritual realm thinks that we're good guys. I'll take it. If it turns out that these are greasy demonic spirits, big bummer. Big bummer. I like this, right? Well, I don't know if I like this. Green Mountain Girl. Jordy Rose said there's a tsunami of demons coming to wipe us all out. A really unsettling statement, but certainly doesn't not line up with the things that I'm hearing. All right, so let's get back into this story. I hope you guys can't hear all the wet, nasty mouth noises that I'm making. I gotta like pull back from my mic a little bit, maybe. Okay. Do do do. So this is me asking him. Uh, I should have read that. Okay, so where are we at? Where are we at? Give me 1 second. Okay, so this is another one, and there's some stuff in between this, but this is very recent. Okay, he says, I know this is a lot of words to open up a message and see, but I'm going to give you what I've got to make up for leaving you hanging, which he did not leave me hanging. I don't know what he means by that. Um, oh, maybe it's because I asked him to be on the show and he said no, understandably so. I offered him anonymity. Still doesn't want to do it. A lot of it is because he doesn't want to upset these things. So totally respect that. Okay, so about coming on Nephilim Death Squad with the Jinn story, I don't know, man. I can't shake the idea that it's not a good move for me to put that stuff on blast. I'm not worried about terrestrial threats as much as I'm worried about the metaphysical consequences of it. And then he says in parentheses, or not parentheses, whatever the fuck these things are called. I hate how fucking insane I sound, by the way. And like, man, it bums me out to hear that because I know what that feels like. I went through that a lot. You know, I've been doing this since I'm 16 years old, saying the craziest things to my friends that would listen. Um, I know I probably worried my mom there for a while, saying things to her and having her be like, "Oh shit, is my kid losing his mind?" So I know what that's like. Although my mom was always a great sport about it, a lot of my friends weren't, and I think I ostracized a lot of people for the sort of narratives that I would tow around. So I get it, man. I've got to admit, I'm still of the mind that that dude probably shouldn't have been talking about what he was talking about. From what I gathered, uh, you and Top might be friends with him, and so I hope the guy's doing okay, which he is. I do reach out to him to make sure everything's cool. He's got some very interesting, how would you say, developments ever since talking to us. The activity dialed up, which once again, actually something that I kind of expected because that wasn't from personal experience. That was from like hearing other people have these uh, similar experiences. They go to a show, they express what happens, all of a sudden the activity dials up. All right, so gathered you and okay. So there's been a thought in the back of my mind ever since he heard the show. He said, "Man, I really hope he's not having any issues." Like I said, I think he's doing all right. I know he said he was told it was time to speak up. Um, maybe that's because of his own experiences that he's feeling this way, and what with him being told explicitly not to draw attention or there would be consequences. Okay, so this was just one of those things where when I heard the show, I don't want to say my blood ran cold or anything, but I got a lump in my throat and a pit in my stomach over the whole subject. Haven't felt like that since I was a kid. I really had to fight survival instincts to reach out to you about it, actually. Like I said, though, if you have any questions, boom. Maybe one of these days I'll get back into contact with her and I'll get the go ahead. I'm not really sure what he means by that. Okay, so one of the other people I talked with about this was a British Muslim chick. I'm not going to say her name, that he met on Instagram before he got banned for being too honest during the lockdown days. How me and this chick met online was a whole wild ass story too. I ended up being troll roped in with a bunch of normies and anons debunking and making sense of all the crazy shit that was happening back in 2020, which I think it was the QAnon thing he's talking about. By the way, okay, so anyway, this girl, the British Muslim girl, told him that Muslims actively believe in jinn. It's just normal shit to them, which I was saying that before, right? I wasn't aware of that until I spoke with her about it. My knowledge on that religion is that Muhammad Muhammad is pedo, and that's about it. Which is like, yeah, that's what I've come to understand from the outside. I don't know much about it either. Uh, so I mentioned before that there was a quid pro quo involved with this entity. The deal was that he gets another year to try to work things out with his wife at the time, and he'd do his best. The other end of the deal was that this entity, which was a female entity, would be allowed to attach to him and feed off of his emotions. As far as he was told by this British Muslim girl, that is one of the many things that jinn are known for in their culture. They attach and they feed on their favorite emotions, which I said earlier, right? Some of these things, they seem to feed off of negativity. And I guess there are different entities that feed off of different energies. So, which makes sense. They attach and they feed off their favorite emotion. I assume it's more off of the energy or frequency we vibrate at that they siphon off of. Not all of them are addicted to low vibrations. Some are addicted to high vibrations. And when I say addiction, that's exactly what I mean. They kind of skim off the top like an SSRI would make you feel, I guess. So they take the brunt of all the sting emotions and feed they feed off these emotions, and they leave you feeling calm and cool and collected at all times. Said super useful in crazy ass situations. So, keeping a cool head, I suppose, in really intense situations until you want to feel something. So emotions are not just a form of sustenance for them. It's like drugs and food all in one. I don't think the one that I dealt with was particularly bad or anything, but he says he's been wrong before. But it was very paranoid about him disengaging from it. And I should have seen that as a sign early on. So I had it attached to me for a little over 2 years. His marriage, M's marriage, did not work out because he just didn't have the emotions there to be present in the relationship to make it work. It's like, damn, this thing fucking kind of screwed you over then. You were emotionally detached, and it's because this thing was feeding off you. So when his end of the deal fell through as a kind of consolation and also a way for it to keep feeding off of him, this entity told me I could ask it questions and it would answer as honestly as possible within reason. Very interesting. Let me just go back to this other screen to check the chat. Bop. 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 All right. It's fine. Hulk Hogan got baptized. So we got Jesus and Hulk Hogan now. Yes, dude, I saw that Leech Troll said this. I saw that what would you call it? Picture of Hulk Hogan baptizing dude. And I'm just like, that is such a wholesome thing. Like, I'm glad that we got Hulk Hogan on Jesus's side. Okay, so let's go back to this. So the last thing he said is he was going to be able to ask it questions in return for basically like his end of the bargain not holding up. All right. I was warned that there were things I couldn't know or fathom as a human, and it was not interested in breaking me mentally or giving me information that I wasn't ready for. So this thing is like, and who knows how true that is, right? But it's saying that some things are just beyond your understanding and they're going to fuck you up to know it. I asked for a name relatively early on, but it didn't give me an answer I was happy with for a long time. Several months. Basically, the answer I got over and over was, there's no way a human can produce the sound to say it properly, followed by a series of like high vibrations through my bones. Not like the one before that rattled my bones and forced me to feel fear. He said I might have to, and that's what we were talking about before. So this is different, right? Before when we were talking about this thing that like resonates through your entire body and fills you with dread, which I personally think it's a common theme across many experiences in the paranormal with some sort of spiritual entity. He's saying this is different. This was almost like a tickling sensation in my bones that kind of changed pitch a few times before stopping. So its name was vibrational, I guess. Um, right. So not something that can be vocalized, I suppose. After nearly a year, I got a more direct answer out of it, but it was clearly just appeasing me and called itself Skel. Skel. So I guess this thing is just like this guy's not going to stop asking me what my name is. Humans are so simple. My name is Skel. Uh, short for Skeletor, bitch. All right, so the year with his wife didn't work out because this entity was skimming off of his emotions. The next year I spent being a massive manho and drinking my ass off. Seems typical for a newly separated guy, but seriously, any chick I wanted to hook up with, I could approach and Skell would just feed me the lines and the right things to say. Sounds super scummy, and that's because it is. That's what he's saying. And I am super aware of how shitty and completely batshit crazy this makes me sound. Uh, but this is right in the thick of my experience, which, like, I get it. It's got to come across your head 1,000 times when you're talking about shit like this. How crazy I sound. I mean, this shit, I sound crazy with half the crap I say. I've got hours of it on the internet, hundreds of hours of crazy person shit that I'm saying on the internet. So every time he says that, like, I get it, man. It sucks. Like, and I don't mean that in like a stop saying it way. I mean it in like a fuck, man. That really, like, I know what that feels like, and it's a shitty way to have to feel. Um, and I'm super aware of how shitty it sounds. When my slutting around and partying reached its peak, she got more vocal. I don't know if that was due to the long-term attachment or she just felt more comfortable speaking up after a while rather than just communicating in concept and ideas directly into his mind. So, I guess moving on from that sort of flashcard imagery way of communication. For example, before she was vocal, I once asked if Jesus was real, and instead of a yes or no, I got shown these mental image snippets of his crucifixion. She didn't have a problem with Jesus, by the way. If anything, it was the opposite, almost as if she was sad and heartbroken about reliving seeing him. There was adoration there. Very interesting, like really interesting. There was adoration there. And from that, I thought that there's no way she could be bad or evil or anything like that. Which, like, the more I come across these stories, guys, the more it's like a lot of these things aren't just pure evil or pure good or anything, like just in the way that people aren't, right? As above, so below. It's like we're all very messy entities. And maybe these things are as well. So, excuse me. And from that, I thought there's nowhere she could be bad or evil or anything like that. I got her to explain to me more of what she was. She wasn't technically an angel. She was something different, but similar. Like she was some sort of prototype of an angel. I would have liked to have asked him to expand on that. It's hard because he says like, "Ask me some questions," and I'm like, "Fuck, where do I begin, dude?" Um, some sort of a prototype of an angel. Very interesting. She told me that she was not immortal, but as long as she feeds, she can maintain and survive. Wow. Uh, even went as far to tell me that an exorcism could potentially be fatal for her, though she'd never been in that situation before. She played it safe. She didn't want to hurt me or anything. She just wanted her fix and to attach to something so that she wasn't alone. Man, I got her to talk more about what was going on under the veil, and she told me that hell is what you would expect: massive chaos, constant battling over who's in charge. Man, I don't know. I just like it's so interesting to me. This kind of shit is so interesting to me. Um, and I do think that it just makes a lot of sense that why would there be this squeaky clean version of things right, within this spiritual realm, that it would be like good guy, bad guy, and hell is all consolidated behind, Satan or Lucifer, and I just think when I think of hell, like heaven and hell, chaos and order, right? Jordan Peterson will tell you that they're strictly allegorical messages for chaos and order. Um, Although I think they are that, and then so much more actual places. Um, and so, yeah, you would expect hell to be completely chaotic. And in that, there is no consolidation of power. It's a fractured and combative place. And there is no cohesive legion of bad guys as much as there's just a bunch of shitty factions. All right. So, and many of the angels that left are no longer on the side of the morning star, which is another name for Lucifer. There's many that want to go home just to be in his presence again, meaning God, including her, this entity that he's communing with, Skell. So there are absolutely some out there that have fallen and that are pushing for good. I don't know how many exist, and even they have their own political battles. Excuse me. Hell is a fractured mess. After a while, I met a chick that really sounded like I'm sorry. After a while, I met a chick that I really liked and knew that it wouldn't work if I couldn't be 100% emotionally present. To be honest, I really wish out I hung. Really wish I hung out with Skell longer than I did after how that relationship ended up. But I like this chick, and I asked Skell to leave. She wasn't pleased about it, and she kept calling. I love this, dude. Um, Kept calling her a maiden of Lilith. Fucking spirit of Lilith out here in these hoes. Spirit of Lilith uh, is for the streets. Okay, later found out she was a pagan witch, the gay new age kind, but apparently there is some slight validity to that. And I would say to that, like, yeah, of course, the new age movement and witchcraft and shit wouldn't have a foothold at all if there wasn't some validity to it. But it's like if you've got 10 important points to make and you make 9 truths and 1 lie, it fucks the whole thing up. And so I think they're showing people things that are real, but they're misleading them ultimately. Slight validity to that. But I like this chick. There was a bit of back and forth for about a day or so before Skell left. She explained how I would slowly go back to being the old, unremarkable me if I didn't keep up with having a good diet, exercise, staying mindful of my ego, etc. Slowly, the gifts she helped me unlock and kept unlocked for me would uh, seep back into the chamber that they were locked in. She used that a lot to try to get me to keep her around. It was that, and she dangled the knowledge access over my head quite a bit too. Eventually, she did leave without any harm done. The last bit of communication I got from her was that she said she'd miss me, and if she died before she saw me again, just know that I am a good human, but I could always be better. And this is a quote. It says, "Go back to him. Some of us can't," was the last words that he got. He says he didn't realize who him was that she met at the time, but in retrospect, it was clearly Jesus Christ she was referring to. And that's about it. There's other shit that happened. I spent 2 years with her, wasn't with a direct purpose or intent like the guy that we interviewed, meaning Colin. My situation was very different. And honestly, I look back on her leaving like losing a reliable friend. I do think there was some malicious intent there to a degree. I know she was feeding off the thrill and excitement of all the sex and parties, but ultimately, I really do believe she actually cared for me as some sort of, he says, I don't know, we were all created by the same God, you know? She understood that kinship in a way that I can't because I wasn't even created when she was. She understands things on a different level than we do, I guess. I don't know, man. Like when he's saying this, I'm like struck with a real sadness Um, and maybe I got to throw the disclaimer out there. Maybe I got to say, hey, I know that I sound fucking crazy right now when I tell you guys that, but I genuinely am. I'm hit with a certain sadness. And then he goes on to make these last points, which I found very interesting. Also, the ones who are clear NPCs these days, meaning non-player characters, right? This is a term that's been popularized lately. This idea that like some of us are just walking around as consumers with no souls. He says the ones who are clear NPCs, it's because they are soulless. That doesn't mean that they don't have a conscience or anything. They're human. They're going to habitually do human things and just follow the herd. God created so many souls to come here. So, with a massive influx being born, there is less and less souls coming here. So, I guess at some point the flesh is disproportionate to the spirits that can inhabit it or the souls that can inhabit it. From what she told me, when the soul inhabited human bodies stop being born entirely, that's when shit is going to pop off because that means the time is up. She compared it to sand trickling through an hourglass. So I guess this idea that like humans will keep being born, but eventually there will be no souls to inhabit them. And once the last person with a soul is born, that's when things are going to go crazy. And karma, he goes on to say, is a thing, but it's basically a spiritual machine that God had the angels create. Apparently, it's very backed up. If God had made it, it wouldn't be backed up, but the angels made it, and so I guess it was fucky. Um, I'll try to think of other random shit you told me you may find interesting. Yeah, dude, like 100%. This is incredibly interesting. He asked a lot of questions. She dodged or was really vague about them. Um, and then he does go on to say that he actually showed his wife this and had a conversation with the text that he sent me, and that she was super supportive, which I know has to be really hard. I'm blessed that my wife, um, she's always known that I'm fucking out of my mind, and so, and I asked him if he could communicate with Skell again. Not that I think he should, but I just wondered if that door was open at all. And he said he's not tried to. He left it all in the past. He thinks entities like this are taking a great risk when they approach someone who isn't just at absolute rock bottom. Very interesting. This is where they feed because it's easy and low risk. They're much less like predators and much more like carrion feeders or simple parasites, which, man, really rolls into something that Top and I are on. And we're talking about Lauren Witzke with it. And I think we might be going on the Elijah Schaffer show to talk about the correlation between parasites and these entities. And it just reminds me of like this passage in the Bible where like Satan is cursed to crawl on his belly for all of his days. And that these parasites, like these parasitic worms, there seems to be a correlation in people who are demonically possessed, but who also have like these fucking parasites. And I cross reference that with stories of witch doctors doing spiritual healing on people and pulling out of them, whether it's through their throat or whatever, this like bundle of black hair. It looks like hair. That's just the best descriptive that I have for it. And you'll catch that a lot. And then also this idea that there's the praying mantis, where if you take it, it'll often have this parasite that convinces the praying mantis to jump into the water and kill itself, which, like, you know, in human terms, that's called suicide. So you've got a parasite that's convincing it to kill itself. And then once it's in the water, this bundle of black worms comes out of the praying mantis. And I feel like there's something there. So it's just interesting that he uses. I'm not saying that's what he was saying, but just interesting to use the terminology parasites. So they're much less like predators, much more like parasites. To get in touch with one, I think you've got to be pounding your fist on the rock just below the hard place, if that makes sense. Man, super interesting. And then I tried to convince him to come on the show one more time. Um, but all I was granted was the sort of the good graces of being allowed to read this. Uh, so let's go to the chat real quick. Green Mountain Girl says, "I wonder if pets can sort of protect you from these things because they're so comforting." I don't know. I sometimes think about that. There's been times where I've had experiences in the night and things felt uneasy, like I was in the presence of something, and uh, and the cat or the dog seemed to react to it. I don't know if they can protect you. I know there's supposedly this whole body of information when it comes to cats, and they're warding off evil spirits. In my opinion, my cats are too fat and retarded to ward off anything, but I do love them. So yeah, man, that story was endlessly interesting to me. And I said to you guys before that that's not the only story that I've received, and it's not the only story that I've heard through other shows. And in fact, M's story was in direct response to another story. So these things are starting to pile up, and there are common threads through them. Um, I just have a feeling that we're on to something very interesting here, Top and myself. And we've been sort of blessed enough that people have been trusting us. They all say the same thing. They all say, I feel so it's crazy for saying this. Um, and but these people are willing to share them with us. Maybe some function of whatever the Ravens Watch turns into now will serve as a place for these testimonies for folks who don't necessarily want to come on. Unless I do get some of them to come on, and the schedule for Nephilim Death Squad is just too packed. Maybe we'll end up doing that. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that I would have been interested in knowing about there. I love that idea because it feels like it makes a lot of sense in my mind. This idea that the spiritual realm is fractured and that these things they're jockeying for position, that there is a spiritual war, but that there's not just one clear side. And maybe like M said, towards the end of things, maybe they'll consolidate. But we are in very interesting times. It was just the other day that Tucker Carlson is on, how many different shows. It's like he's talking to Roseanne Barr and they're talking about the Nephilim. Very strange. He is on another show and he's talking about this alien disclosure and how there is a spiritual aspect to the alien disclosure. And there is a dark side of these things that he's not even comfortable talking about and that would shake people to their core. Although I'm sure I'm paraphrasing. And then he's on Timcast or whatever it was, America. They were on a stage with Tim Pool, Luke Radowski, all these characters. And very soon into the conversation, I would say around like the 40-minute mark, they're talking about schizophrenia and demons, right? Just after Marzinski was on Nephilim Death Squad, and then they're talking about how this is, this is biblical in nature. And this is not something that you would typically get from like Tim Pool and characters like this. And I mean, look, I'm pretty sure I can say it now, but Top and I we're going to Miami on Friday, and we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about the Nephilim, and we're going to talk about a lot of things, but we're doing it on Luke Radowski and Clint Russell's show. So big deal for us. It's a massive show, huge platform, great opportunity. Totally blessed. The speed that this show is moving with is insane. Henna, they've been moving in that direction, and they have, right? I've noticed the same thing. It's like slowly but surely we've just been pushing this bar a little bit further in regards to the aliens. My fear is that they're going to characterize this whole alien UFO thing as highly advanced a highly advanced species from another part of the galaxy with super dope technology who just wants to help us from destroying our own planet and destroying ourselves in mutually assured nuclear destruction. And I don't think that that's true. I think these things are our ancient adversaries. So I got to admit, when I hear Tucker Carlson say, and I don't trust him worth a shit, uh, that's just where I stand. I don't trust him. But when he says that these things are ancient and dark and this is spiritual, and that these things are, in biblical paintings, religious paintings and shit like that, he's talking about UFOs and aliens, like, huh, interesting. So I don't know what to make of that, but as with anybody, and I say the same thing to the audience, with these people and with me, pump the brakes, do your own research, don't let us lead the way, uh, and don't put all your faith in people. Leach says Tucker Carlson is NDS confirmed. Yeah, dude, he's got to be watching. I'm sorry, that's just how I feel. Maybe he's not watching as much as it's like he is. He's just these clips and stuff are popping up in his peripheral. You know what I mean? And maybe they're coming across his feed. Maybe Nephilim shit, the phrase Nephilim shit. Maybe it's reaching his zeitgeist. For him and Roseanne Barr to be sitting there and saying that, wild, wild. Green Mountain Girl says people will fall for that line. The helpful aliens, almost too easy. That's my biggest fear because, like I said, I think these things are fucking ancient adversaries. You know, Josie the redhead libertarian said the other day, she was like, no matter how much you think the government hates you, they hate you way more than that. And I said, yeah, it's because the government is being influenced by the fallen and the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim. And the fallen, they hate humanity. They always have. They hate humanity more than we could even quantify. They rebelled against God because they hated us so badly. So, um, this idea of painting these things as like benevolent helpers, they're advanced beyond us and they're going to take care of us. Whew, fuck, that's dangerous. If the truth is the exact opposite, if the truth is they hate us more than anything else. Yeah, he's got that. Leach says he's got that red Kabbalah bracelet on. Yeah, yeah, and that's that whole thing is very telling. Um, I don't know, man. I don't know what to make of it all. Why on earth? Maybe it's like an effort to steer the narrative, right? Like the floodgates are opening in regards to what these things supposedly are. Um, Top and I, we play whatever small role we can in trying to spread awareness. And we're not saying we definitively know what they are, but I'm saying this is what I suspect that they are. And then on the regular, I try to compel people to look at the evidence for it. Um, maybe that's happening across a lot of different spectrums with a lot of different sort of conspiracy influencers. I don't have a fucking better name for that. Um, and maybe you can't stop that tide. And maybe if you resist it too much, it becomes very obvious that you're controlled opposition. So maybe you do have to kind of like go with the flow a little bit and try to steer as much as the ship as you can, even though you're getting sucked into an ever increasing current that is the narrative falling apart. And then Hannah Pose says they have to tell us what they are doing. Yeah, that could be it too. There seems to be this, like M said, this idea that karma is a thing that the angels created and it's not a perfect system and it's kind of broken and fucked up. Um, so maybe there is a karmic system and they do have to play by certain rules in order to not get the shit end of the stick when it comes to that system. So like, yeah, revelation of the method or predictive programming or the symbolism or the signaling that the elites are constantly doing, they have to show their hand. And if you're not smart enough to see it, that's not their responsibility. but they've shown you, and so they're free of some sort of karmic debt. So I think I'll stick it there, guys. A couple of announcements really quick. We are changing things up on Nephilim Death Squad, and some of you guys are also fans of that show. It's no longer going to be a live show. We're moving away from that, but we don't want to lose the chat. So what we're going to be doing is, to our Patreon subscribers, patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad. If you subscribe, you will receive a link to our StreamYard. So while we record these episodes, you can watch that happen live, and you can communicate with us in the chat. We want this to be a home for our OG listeners, the people who have been there since the beginning, and also, honestly, the most interesting people too, because a lot of you guys who have been there since the beginning, you ask the coolest questions or you put forth the coolest comments. We want you guys to be able to be a part of the show. And so if you go to patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad, there is a $3 tier that gets you the butt homunculus level, a $5 tier, which gets you Squad Soldier, and we're going to put up a $10 tier, which is Nephilim Hunter level. And so there's also going to be a bunch of other perks that come along with that. Depending on what tier you subscribe at, we can provide you with discount codes for merch. On the topic of merch, don't forget to go to toplobster.com, and any merch that you purchase between now and the end of January will put you in the running for the raffle to get yourself a enhanced Royal Rife machine from realrifetechnologies.com. That's Rife, Matt Rife's, not the comedian. I guess, I don't know what you would call him, technologist. I don't know. I think I could have just made that word up. He builds therapeutic frequency machines, and people, Henna, you're asking, let's go butt homunculi. Do you get the chat with $3? Yeah, I think so. I think we're going to do that. We're going to shut that eventually, but if you get in early, to the Patreon, which is not a lot of subscribers, we just launched it. You get in early, and yeah, we're going to make sure that happens for you. Eventually, we're going to close the gate on that, though. And so, like I said, if you purchase anything from Nephilim Death Squad, from toplobster.com, you're going to have access to this raffle. And look, guys, I'm telling you, we're going to end up doing raffles like this because it's already crushing. And we're going to end up doing raffles like this again in the future, but the show is growing exponentially. We're going on, I don't even know if we fucking said this on other shows. We're going on Tinfoil Hat soon. All right, we've been officially invited. We're going on Tinfoil Hat. We're going on We Are Change, Luke Rudowski and Clint's show. We're going on, I believe, even Elijah Schaefer's show very soon for another appearance. This is going to grow exponentially. I can't even tell you how fast things are moving. It's honestly a little bit overwhelming. Right now, the fan base is small. The pool is not big. It's very likely that you can win this thing if you get in and get yourself some merch. Because the next time we do a raffle, the pool is going to be bigger. It just is what it is. So anyway, go ahead and do that. And I guess that's it. Oh, don't forget to go to YouTube and Spotify, Rumble, and Apple Podcasts. We have homes for the Ravens Watch, and we have homes for Nephilim Death Squad. Leave us a rating and a review. It really helps the show to grow. And if you can't contribute monetarily, but you still want to help the show, excellent way to do it. And I think that's a good place to leave it. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that this episode was cool because, you know, I'm moving away from interviews on this channel, and I'm trying to do something a little bit different. I want to interact more with you guys here, and I want to read more stories like that. So if you or anybody you know had a very similar experience to M or to Colin, and you'd like to contribute, send me a DM. And if you want to talk, we could do it on the show. If you'd rather not talk, I'd still be very interested in reading your story. So thank you guys so much for watching the Ravens Watch. And until next time, peace.